In this demonstration, we're going to get into how to use Photoshop patterns for various techniques to apply to your creative projects. So to apply a pattern, there's always multiple ways, but one of the most common ways is through the paint bucket tool, which is often nested underneath the gradient tool. When you go to activate this, you do have the option here, instead of foreground color, you have the option for pattern. Now, as you go through to apply a pattern, by default, there's a bunch of different default patterns, and if you've ever loaded or created patterns, they'll be available to you inside of Photoshop. So our bigger reason of showing patterns is to help you know how to load patterns. They are very tedious. You can do a quick search for subtle patterns, and it'll basically bring you to this website. That's a great free resource for designers. And basically, designers have created a series of patterns available to any designers. There are always a lot of other resources out there as well, but this is a popular one for beginning level designers as well as our web designers. Now, the way this works is a pattern is going to be created in a way that whatever's at the top and whatever's at the bottom will be made so that it's meant to repeat, a lot like a wallpaper. The same thing with the left and the right side. It's made to repeat. So it is usually a smaller image, and it has been designed just large enough so that you have that ability to repeat. Now, you do have the option to download these files. I have downloaded a few here, so I'm actually going to open up a few different files here. I think I've got 3 different ones to demonstrate, and you'll notice they're pretty small files. So the purpose of this lesson is not to teach you how to create a pattern from scratch. As you can see, that would be very tedious, but essentially whoever has created this has created the pattern so that the top and the bottom are made in a way so that whenever we do apply this to our design, it will repeat seamlessly, is really what the goal is. So when you're looking for patterns before you're ready to start designing ones from scratch, you can do a search for subtle patterns or seamless patterns, and the goal would be to have it already created or to create a pattern on your own. And from there, once you have your pattern, it's pretty simple. It's just basically a select all, which if you do not remember that option, it's just select all right there. And then it's very similar to creating a brush. You'll notice it's actually right below creating a brush. So define pattern, and then you have this option to name it. I'm going to leave it the same, which is the image name, and then we'll just go ahead and say OK. Now when I go over to my document, we do have the ability to either apply it to our entire canvas, or we could make a selection first. So I'll just demonstrate one, and then I'll demonstrate the second way. So when you activate that paint bucket tool, again, you want to make sure pattern is selected, and then usually it's going to become this last one that is in this list here of all of our patterns that we have available to us. Again, Photoshop does come with a lot of default patterns. We're probably not going to use those, so we'll just go ahead and test and see. And then we can just look real close, and this is meant to be one that goes on a website, so it is pretty small, but you can see it is pretty seamless. It is meant to repeat, and it fills a very large canvas. Now let's say, for instance, I wanted to apply it to a part of a design. If I select something first and then I get my paint bucket out, I can basically apply it to a small section of a design. So again, that process is pretty straightforward, but just to show you again, this is another pattern, and we'll just do the same steps. Command A, then edit, define pattern. I'm going to leave it the same as the image name, and then we'll go ahead and make another one out of this one here. This is like a fabric texture, so if you're painting, you know, a character and you're trying to get like a fabric texture on the character, this is one that may work well for that purpose. So again, we select all, edit, define pattern. Now we have 2 new patterns we can go and test out. So again, in this case, I'm going to select first and just show you. So this is one pattern. And then we can select another area here and show you the third pattern we've created. So that is patterns. The only other thing that's really critical to know is, a lot like brushes, you want to know how to save them. So this is a little bit different than brushes. They don't give you a lot of options to manipulate patterns beyond saving them. So when you go in to create this pattern, when you're working with the paint bucket, you'll see this little arrow right next to your option for choosing the pattern. We're going to actually choose this little sprocket wheel, and then from there you have the option to, for instance, rename the pattern. We could delete the pattern, or the other two important parts is it's very similar to Photoshop brushes. You either can import a pattern, which is a PAT file, or you can export. So if I have this brush or this pattern right here selected and I say export, when I go to save, that PAT file is going to basically be saved inside of this folder here. And then at any point when I want to go and import patterns, it's almost the same process as going in and loading brushes. It's just patterns instead. So if you do want to be able to load those, I'll load this other one that I had sitting in here, and we'll see what happens. And so I have a new folder now for the one that I had loaded in, and I've got all these cool new patterns that if I want to use, and these were ones I had downloaded from an external site, but just so you can see the process. I've got that one, and then I've got this one. There's like a whole group of different patterns that we can work from. So this is something that's going to be really useful as you go through. You are going to want to know how to import, export, and even save your own patterns so that you have a lot more control. So with that said, that's patterns, and if you all have any questions, just reach out and let me know.